The first time Martin Keller's doorbell rang that Tuesday morning, he believed it was the landscaper. After all, the West Hampton Estates Homeowners Association kept an ironclad schedule for lawn care. Tuesdays, 7:30 a.m. sharp, or risk a fine. So Martin, standing inside his tidy kitchen with its honey oak cabinets and glass jars of herbal teas, paused to listen. He heard shuffling on the porch, no sign of the usual leaf blower hum. Then the bell chimed again, more urgent this time. Something was off. A sense of foreboding coiled in the pit of his stomach. In the 7 years since Martin lost his sight, his service dog, Bentley, had become his constant companion, the guiding presence that turned a black horizon into an accessible path. Bentley's harness sat near the back door, with its neatly stitched handle shaped to Martin's hand. The dog's ears perked at the sound of footsteps, but he stayed put. Bentley was disciplined like that. Martin opened the door. He recognized the faint smell of lavender cologne used by Cynthia Vance, the head of the HOA. She was a perfectionist who believed humming lawnmowers on a Sunday or an out-of-place recycling bin was basically the end of civilization. Martin's neighbor, a mild-tempered woman named Gina, stood behind Cynthia, though Gina's presence felt more like reluctant backup. "Martin, good morning," Cynthia said. He nodded, bracing himself. No conversation with Cynthia ever felt casual. She always carried papers. Martin heard them rustle like the wings of some rigid bird. "Is there an issue?" he asked, hoping it was just about garbage placement or some new parking rule. "The usual mundane stuff." Cynthia cleared her throat. "We've had complaints. About Bentley." A cold breeze drifted through Martin's mind. Complaints? About a dog that rarely barked? He was known for his calm demeanor, especially on Martin's daily walks. "Bentley? He's well-trained." "Cynthia, is there a specific concern?" She hesitated. A neighbor recorded a video. "Bentley barked loudly at a FedEx truck last week. We also have a record of him whining in the common area. It violates the association's community quietude policy." Martin's heart sank. "He's a service dog. He's my eyes." "Cynthia." A flutter of papers. Gina stepped forward softly. The HOA had a special meeting," Gina said. "The board voted that continued noise disruptions, even from service animals, are not permissible. They're saying you'll need to remove him from the premises." Bentley whined, as if sensing the tension. In a split second, Martin's anger and fear collided. "You can't ban a service dog," he said, voice trembling. "It's against the ADA. It's illegal." Cynthia gave a plastic smile. "We're researching the law, but we believe we're within our rights to enforce community standards of peace and quiet. Many associations have done so successfully." "Maybe they have," Martin replied, forcing calm into his voice, "but that doesn't make it right." He heard Gina breathe in sharply, possibly sympathetic, but not daring to speak. "We're giving you a 15-day notice," Cynthia continued, "to find an alternative living arrangement for your dog. We suggest hiring an in-home aide for your mobility needs." The door clicked shut moments later. Martin felt a raw lump in his throat. Bentley nudged his leg, as if to reassure him. Martin reached down, fingers finding the soft fur at Bentley's neck, the gentle rise and fall of the dog's breathing. Bentley was always there, helping Martin navigate grocery aisles, weaving skillfully through traffic on a crosswalk, or simply nuzzling comfort during lonely nights. 15 days, Martin said, fighting the sting in his eyes. "They expect me to replace you with some stranger?" He thought about calling an attorney. But lawyers cost money, and Martin's finances were already tight. Disability benefits and the modest income from transcribing audiobooks. He had no illusions about a legal battle with the West Hampton Estates Board. They had deep pockets and an entire legal committee. Standing up to them felt like attacking a fortress with a spoon. By noon, Martin had read and reread the letter in Braille, each seeming to press deeper into his anxiety. The phrase, "unacceptable disturbance," repeated like a taunt. He remembered the day he first got Bentley from a nonprofit training center in Seattle. The instructor had told him, "This dog is more than an animal. He's your freedom." Over the years, Martin discovered that was true. He traveled, tried new restaurants, volunteered at the local community center. All possible because Bentley guided him. Now, the association demanded silence. Suddenly, Martin felt the quiet of his cul-de-sac was not peace, but a menacing hush, a place where even a single bark might trigger condemnation. He inhaled, rubbed a hand over his short, graying hair, and then made a decision. He wouldn't hand Bentley over without a fight. He grabbed his phone, found a contact for the local disability rights group, and left a voicemail, his voice shaking as he explained that his HOA was threatening to evict his dog. Then he sat at his kitchen table, hands trembling. Bentley rested his head on Martin's lap. Somehow, Martin murmured, "We'll get through this." Outside, a hush lingered like a storm cloud over West Hampton Estates. Perfect lawns, perfect mailboxes, perfect silence. Martin wondered how long it would be before that silence swallowed him whole. Word spread fast among the neighbors who actually cared. A handful of them recognized how vital Bentley was to Martin. A few texted or dropped by to see if he needed help. But West Hampton Estates was mostly retirees and career people who valued serenity like a prized heirloom. Many shrugged, saying rules are rules. A day after the dreaded HOA visit, Martin found himself forced to strategize. He checked emails, hoping the disability rights group or an attorney might respond quickly. Nothing. Anxiety gnawed at him. If he couldn't stop the HOA, he'd have to rehome Bentley, at least temporarily. The thought alone made his stomach churn. That afternoon, Martin's friend, Greg, arrived. Greg lived a few miles away in a more relaxed neighborhood. No HOAs, no polished, quiet zones. He was a jovial, barrel-chested contractor in his early 60s. Although Martin couldn't see it, he sensed Greg's warm grin whenever he spoke. Greg helped Martin draft a letter to the HOA, citing the Americans with Disabilities Act. "Look," Greg said while typing, "this is a slam dunk for you. The ADA is on your side. They can't just ban service dogs because of a few barks." But Martin remembered the conversation with Cynthia. She said they researched the law. "I'm worried they'll claim they aren't a public entity or that they have the right to enforce noise regulations on private property." Greg huffed. "That's nonsense. Basic fairness is on your side. This is about them wanting a silent, picture-perfect environment. People pay big money here, so they don't have to hear, well, anything. I see it all the time on my job sites. They want to control everything." When the letter was finished, Martin signed it, carefully following the alignment that Greg guided his hand to, and Greg walked it over to the HOA's administrative office. Cynthia wasn't there, just a clerk who promised to pass it on. After that, Martin waited and waited. Days passed without a reply, with each sunrise Martin feeling like a countdown to eviction. He found himself withdrawing. Normally, he went for daily walks with Bentley, but now he felt uneasy. What if the dog barked at a passing truck and the HOA seized on that evidence to push him out even faster? The stress turned once simple routines into tense undertakings. Bentley sensed it too, whining softly at the door, anxious to do his job. Martin did his best to reassure him with extra belly rubs and bits of kibble. On the 5th day after the letter's submission, Martin decided he couldn't stay cooped up. He left the house with Bentley, harness in hand, determined to pick up groceries. The neighborhood was eerily still. No kids playing, no chatter, just the faint hum of distant traffic. The walkway was meticulously maintained, no cracks or weeds. Even the flower beds were symmetrical. Martin found it oddly unsettling, like walking through a photo shoot for a suburban catalog. Bentley guided him toward the small grocery store 2 blocks away. The dog stopped at the corner, waiting for Martin's cue to cross. The crossing signal chirped. Martin recognized the beep meant walk. They advanced carefully. Halfway across, an engine roared. The screech of tires came next, rattling Martin's nerves. A driver was accelerating against the signal, perhaps impatient or distracted. Bentley let out a sharp bark, pulling Martin back just in time. The car blazed by, horn blaring. Adrenaline surged through Martin's veins. That bark likely saved him from a severe accident. When Martin reached the sidewalk, he collapsed onto a nearby bench, heart pounding. Bentley stood at attention, tail swishing anxiously. People had seen what happened. Surely, they must have heard the horn and the bark. But in West Hampton Estates, folks rarely lingered outside, and if they were inside their pristine homes, they probably heard nothing. Once the shock subsided, Martin finished his errand. By the time he got home, though, fear and anger churned in him. He recalled the driver's horn and Bentley's bark. His dog's bark was literally the difference between safety and injury, maybe even life and death. That's what the HOA wanted to silence. Bentley's safety harness clicked as Martin removed it. The dog nudged at his hand, tail wagging in reassurance. Martin gave a wry grin. They call you too noisy? I say you're just right. But that small victory felt overshadowed by the countdown. 10 days remained before the HOA's final decision. Martin's phone still lacked any missed calls or emails from legal advocates. Even Greg was baffled. In a system that was supposed to protect people with disabilities, how could no one be stepping up for a clear-cut case? Martin tried to push the worry aside. He had audiobooks to transcribe, voice recordings to annotate. Work required concentration. He forced his mind to focus, dictating slowly and carefully into software that converted his spoken words into text. Yet every time he paused, the dread seeped back in. The possibility that in less than 2 weeks, he and Bentley might be forced apart. Near sundown, Martin sat on his front porch while Bentley lay at his feet. He sipped lukewarm coffee and listened to the cicadas in the distance. Strange how an environment that prided itself on quiet still had the natural hum of insects and the rustle of leaves. If nature's gentle noises weren't banned, why should a life-saving bark be singled out? He sighed and wondered if maybe the quiet was just a veneer for something darker beneath, the kind of uniform, unyielding calm that punishes anyone who dares disturb it. Martin patted Bentley's head, and a single thought crystallized in his mind. I'm not letting them take you away, pal. On day 8, Martin experienced the unthinkable. He decided to walk to the post office to mail some documents related to his latest freelance job. Despite the tension with the HOA, daily tasks pressed on. Bentley navigated around a neatly trimmed hedge, then paused at a curb. Martin heard a slight rattle overhead, somebody's wind chime. Otherwise, the street was still. Then something shifted beneath Martin's left foot, a loose patch of concrete, or perhaps a hidden slope. His cane tapped uselessly against air, and before he could react, his balance gave out. He toppled forward, catching his shoulder on the curb. The impact sent a jolt of pain through his torso. Bentley, he gasped, panic lacing his voice. Instantly, the dog tried to plant himself to brace Martin's fall, but the angle was too steep. Martin felt the sting of gravel scraping his palm. He lay there for a moment, disoriented. Bentley whined, circling to get Martin upright. His own heart hammered in his chest. Now, on a typical block in a typical community, someone might have rushed to assist, a passerby, a neighbor watering their lawn. But West Hampton Estates had no foot traffic. No kids playing ball. The closest house behind Martin's tumble likely had double-pane windows sealed against any outside noise. For a few frantic seconds, he feared that he might remain sprawled on the sidewalk, unseen and unheard. Bentley barked, a desperate, full-throated bark that Martin had never heard before. A call for help. He trembled, realizing how ironic it was. The bark, strictly the sort of noise the HOA wanted to ban, could be his only beacon. Bentley barked again, louder. Eventually, a door slammed somewhere, and footsteps approached. A woman's voice called out, "Are you okay?" She sounded rushed, uncertain. Martin's shoulder throbbed as he tried to rise. I just fell." He felt a steady hand grip his upper arm. "Let's get you to your feet," the woman said. "Hold on." With her help and Bentley leaning into him, Martin stood, knees shaky, heart still racing. "Thank you," he managed. "I'm Martin." "Suzette," she replied breathlessly. "I live at 1012, across the street." I only heard the dog barking. Martin noted how subdued her voice was, as if she worried someone might overhear. Once upright, he steadied himself and tested his shoulder. It hurt, but didn't feel broken. "You might have saved me a long wait on the curb." Suzette gave a short, nervous laugh. "Bentley did, you mean?" "Honestly, I heard barking from my kitchen and got curious." "Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm mostly bruised. Thanks for stepping outside." She hesitated. "I wish I could do more." But with the HOA, she trailed off. Martin could almost feel the weight of unspoken disapproval around them, the hush that demanded compliance. "Anyway," she added softly, "I'm sorry you've been going through this. A service dog is the last thing they should ban." Martin shook his head. "I agree, but apparently, I'm in the minority around here." Suzette exhaled. "I'd let them have it if I weren't already on thin ice for planting those geraniums without approval. This place can be suffocating." A rustle of movement suggested she glanced over her shoulder, as though worried about being spotted associating with a neighborhood rebel. She walked Martin as far as the corner, ensuring he was steady. "I'll keep an ear out, in case you need anything," she whispered. He thanked her again, and she vanished into the stillness. Martin resumed his route to the post office, feeling each step reverberate in his sore body. Bentley pressed close, as if worried he might topple over any moment. The short journey felt twice as long. That evening, Martin iced his shoulder and sat in the dark of his living room, replaying the incident in his mind. If Bentley hadn't barked, would he have lain there indefinitely? A wave of anger coursed through him. Anger at the HOA, at their petty rules, at the neighbors who turn a blind eye. Sure, Suzette helped, but only after hearing Bentley's offensive noise. A ding on his phone cut through his thoughts. It was an email from a local disability advocacy group. Martin's heart leaped. He opened the message with trembling fingers, using his screen reader app. The voice read out, "Dear Mr. Keller, thank you for reaching out. We understand your situation. Unfortunately, due to a backlog of cases, we cannot provide legal representation at this time. We encourage you to contact the state ADA hotline or a private attorney." Martin let the phone drop on a couch. So that was it. He'd have to handle this on his own or shell out money for a lawyer he couldn't afford. And time was slipping away. Deep in the quiet hush, Martin recognized a bitter reality. The rules that the HOA championed were effectively muzzling him, too. In a place where even a bark of help was vilified, his voice felt stifled. The official countdown said he had 7 days left to either remove Bentley or face fines, eviction threats, maybe worse. His next idea was to reach out to the local media. Sometimes public pressure was more effective than legal means, especially in a smaller suburb. But Martin was never the type to relish attention. Before losing his sight, he'd been a middle manager at a small publishing house, content with a modest life. Now, he felt forced into a crusade he never asked for. Bentley curled up at his feet. Martin stroked the dog's ears. "All this fuss because you barked," Martin said softly. "Yet if you hadn't barked, I might still be lying on that curb." He leaned back against the couch and shut his useless eyes. The hush enveloped him again, the hush of a neighborhood that prized silence at any cost. In that moment, Martin wondered if the cost would be too steep for him to pay. By day 11, word had trickled out about Martin's predicament. Not through official channels, but via whispers and worried neighbors like Suzette. A small local news station sent a young journalist named Carmen Montoya to interview Martin. The station had seen a Facebook post from one of Martin's old colleagues. Carmen arrived one afternoon, a gentle soul who asked Martin if he felt comfortable doing an on-camera segment. "Our viewers need to see you," she said. "It's more impactful that way. But if that makes you uncomfortable." Martin thought of all the times he had avoided cameras, feeling self-conscious about his milky gray eyes. But now, the stakes were too high for pride. "Let's do it," he replied, nerves knotting in his stomach. They set up on Martin's porch. Bentley lay obediently at his feet while Carmen asked questions about his life, his blindness, and how Bentley assisted him daily. The neighborhood's quiet loomed like a silent judge in the background. Martin explained how one bark, or a series of whines when Bentley sensed danger, was crucial to his independence. Carmen's microphone caught the trembling in Martin's voice as he spoke about the fall. "If Bentley hadn't barked, who knows how long I would have been on that sidewalk." He paused, feeling a surge of emotion. "He's not just a pet. He's my partner, my protector, and the HOA wants him gone because of noise." At the end of the interview, Carmen offered Martin a sympathetic squeeze of the arm. "I'll push this story, see if we can get it aired by tomorrow evening." True to her word, the segment ran on the 6 o'clock local news under the headline, "Service Dog Under Fire. HOA Demands Silence." The next day, Martin's phone buzzed with calls and texts. People from neighboring towns, a few out-of-state folks, some outraged, some offering advice. A local attorney left a voicemail stating he might be able to help for a reduced rate, though even a reduced rate might strain Martin's budget. The HOA, on the other hand, escalated. On day 13, Martin received a final notice in the mail. With crisp, neatly typed lines, it spelled out, "Mr. Martin Keller, you are in violation of the West Hampton Estates noise policy. Your service dog must be removed from this property by the next business day. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $250, enforceable by lien and possible legal action." A chill spidered through Martin's body. A lien on his home? Could they really do that? He called Greg, who swore loudly on the phone. They're bluffing, but they can cause you a world of financial hurt. That's how these HOAs operate. They intimidate people into submission. Martin's frustration burst. They can't just override the Americans with Disabilities Act, can they? Greg sighed. In practice, they can try. They'll claim local private property rules supersede certain aspects. They know you might not have the resources to fight. It's all about the bigger bully with the bigger checkbook. Worn down, Martin's mind drifted to the possibility of leaving. Maybe he could move in with Greg or find a small apartment that didn't restrict service animals. An obvious fallback, but it felt like giving in. This was his home, with the kitchen he loved, the lamp collection from his traveling days, the memory-laden backyard where he once hosted barbecues before his eyesight failed. He didn't want to be exiled by petty rules. Despite the looming threat, Martin decided to stand firm. On day 14, he placed a frantic call to the attorney who'd left a voicemail. Her name was Helena Thompson. She specialized in housing discrimination cases, though she typically charged $200 an hour. "Your story hits close to home," Helena said, "since my father was blind as well. I'll represent you on a contingency basis for the initial stages. But I want you to understand there's no guarantee the HOA won't drag this out. They've got resources." Relief and apprehension warred inside Martin. "I understand. I can't lose Bentley. I'll file an emergency injunction request. That might at least buy you time," Helena offered. That evening, Martin tried to unwind by playing old Sinatra records. He could almost imagine the vinyl's gentle crackle lighting up the living room. As the smooth notes of "Fly Me to the Moon" filled the air, he reached down to pet Bentley, who rested loyally at his side. Martin's mind flickered back to a memory of his father teaching him to dance, feet on top of bigger feet, swirling around the living room. Life had changed so much since those days. Now, instead of dancing, Martin found himself balancing precariously on an emotional tightrope, uncertain if or when he'd crash. Early next morning, day 15, Martin's phone rang. Helena, sounding breathless. The judge granted a temporary restraining order. "It means the HOA can't enforce removing Bentley until there's a hearing. We have 3 weeks to prepare." Martin nearly dropped the phone in gratitude. "So, Bentley's safe for now?" "Yes, for now. But the HOA might come at us with every tactic they have. They might claim Bentley barks excessively, that it's not a legitimate service dog, or something else. We'll need to document everything." When he hung up, a wave of relief coursed through Martin. He nestled his face into Bentley's fur and murmured, "They're not kicking you out just yet." But an undercurrent of unease remained. What if the judge ultimately ruled in the HOA's favor? What if the board conjured evidence of excessive noise to sway public opinion? Martin realized that, in this fight, the truth might not matter as much as who had the power to shape it. In a community built on aesthetics and perfect appearances, the lines between right and wrong could be easily blurred by well-funded bureaucrats. Still, for the first time in weeks, Martin slept more soundly that night. The next day, he began gathering statements from neighbors. He'd asked Suzette for a letter verifying Bentley rarely barked, and only in emergencies. He'd compile receipts for Bentley's certified training. He'd cling to every piece of proof that this dog was essential, not optional. Outside, the manicured lawns stretched into the subdued distance. The perfect quiet facade. Martin wondered if, within this hush, he might raise enough of a roar, through media, legal channels, neighbors, to ensure he and Bentley remained team. That single bark had saved his life. Perhaps now, it might help save his home, too. The day of the hearing arrived, bringing an unusual flurry of activity to the typically hushed West Hampton estates. A modest crowd gathered at the county courthouse, local reporters, a few concerned citizens, members of the HOA. Martin was thankful for Helena by his side, a tower of calm competence in a navy blazer. Inside the courtroom, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Martin felt the bench under him, cold and rigid, as though reflecting the tension in the air. Helena patted his hand. "Keep your composure. Just answer the judge honestly." The HOA's attorney, Mr. Langford, was a tall, silver-haired man who spoke in measured, clipped phrases. He introduced documents claiming Bentley's barking had been chronic, accompanied by neighbor complaints. Each incident was described as a violation of community serenity, referencing carefully curated policies. They labeled Martin's claim to ADA protection as overreaching, arguing that the association had a right to uphold noise standards under private property governance. Helena countered with Martin's track record and statements from neighbors, especially Suzette's, explaining how Bentley's bark had summoned her help. She read from the Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines, emphasizing that service animals are protected from discriminatory restrictions. She highlighted transcripts from the local news piece, illustrating how the dog barked only during moments of potential danger. Martin's heart pounded. Would the judge see through the HOA's veneer? Or would they be swayed by the formal tone of Mr. Langford's legalese? When called to testify, Martin felt hundreds of eyes on him. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a firm but patient voice, asked him to state his experience living in West Hampton Estates. He swallowed hard. "I've been there for 6 years. Bentley has been my service dog all that time, trained through a reputable nonprofit. He helps me navigate day-to-day tasks, from crossing the street to retrieving items if I drop them. Barks are rare, but if they do occur, it's typically a response to potential danger or a means to alert someone that I need help." Mr. Langford's voice cut in smoothly. "Mr. Keller, are you aware of multiple instances documented by your neighbors where Bentley was heard barking at seemingly minor stimuli, like a passing mail carrier or a trash truck?" Martin felt the heat of frustration rise, but he kept calm. "I can't see what the dog perceives as a threat or not, sir. He's trained to bark when he senses something that might harm me. That includes large vehicles. He's doing his job." Langford pivoted. "And are you also aware that every bark is a violation of the HOA's strict noise policy?" Helena objected. "That policy cannot supersede federal protections." The judge nodded in acknowledgement, instructing Langford to proceed carefully. Martin's testimony ended soon after. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal arguments. Finally, the judge called for a break, then returned with her ruling. In a calm, measured tone, she stated, "The court finds that while West Hampton Estates has a vested interest in maintaining a peaceful environment, Mr. Keller's right to a service animal, as protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act, takes precedence. The evidence does not support that Bentley's barking constitutes an unmanageable disturbance. Rather, it appears incidental to his duties. The HOA shall cease its eviction attempts and may not impose fines related to this issue." Martin gripped the edge of his seat as the words sank in. Helena exhaled a triumphant sigh, her grin stretching across her face. There were murmurs in the gallery, some disappointed, others relieved. Suzette's small cheer broke the hush. Just like that, Martin's ordeal with the HOA seemed resolved, at least in the eyes of the law. But walking out of the courtroom, he wondered if the tension in West Hampton Estates would ever truly go away. Perhaps the board would find new ways to make his life difficult. Or maybe, just maybe, this public victory would force them to reconsider their stance. Outside, a cluster of reporters waited. Cameras clicked. Microphones were thrust forward. Martin felt overwhelmed, but Helena guided him through a few quick statements. "We're grateful for the judge's clear interpretation of the law," Helena said. "Mr. Keller's case underscores the importance of protecting service animals and their owners from unfair regulations. When it was Martin's turn to speak, he only managed, "Bentley saved me." More than once. "I'm thankful the law recognized he's not just noise. He's my lifeline." He and Bentley left with Greg and Suzette in tow. After the courthouse crowd thinned, Suzette surprised them with homemade oatmeal cookies she'd stashed in her bag. Martin laughed, warmth filling him that had been absent for weeks. Even Bentley seemed to sense the relaxed energy, wagging his tail as if they'd conquered a mountain. Upon returning to West Hampton Estates, Martin felt both vindicated and a little uneasy. Sure enough, some neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. A couple offered subdued nods. One or two openly glared. But Suzette walked beside Martin, ensuring that any silent disapproval around them couldn't overshadow the significance of his victory. Once inside his house, Martin removed Bentley's harness. "We did it," he whispered, dropping to one knee. Bentley licked his cheek in response. Though Martin couldn't see his beloved dog's expression, he felt the joy. Bentley's soft fur, the wagging tail, the comforting presence. The phone rang off the hook that evening with congratulations. People from the disability rights community, old friends, even a retired judge who'd seen the broadcast. Yet in the midst of calls, texts, and messages, Martin's primary sensation was relief. Relief that he could simply be at home, with the quiet that he chose, not the one forced by petty board members. That night, he rested in his living room with a steaming cup of chamomile tea. Bentley dozed by the armchair. Martin reflected on the irony. The noise that started it all, a single bark, had been a cry for help. And in the end, that small act of disturbance not only saved him from falling unnoticed, but exposed the flawed hush imposed on him. He let out a long, steady breath. No matter how meticulous the lawns or how controlled the environment, every community harbors hidden battles. Some revolve around petty differences, others around fundamental rights. For Martin, the ability to have his service dog was a matter of dignity and safety, not convenience or compliance. It was never really about the noise. It was about being allowed to live fully in a world already dark to his eyes. Bentley stirred, lifting his head. Martin reached down and patted the dog. Outside, the cicadas sang in the distance, unafraid of disturbing the evening air. And for once, Martin found the quiet comforting, because it was no longer his enemy. It was simply the natural hush of a place he could finally call home, with Bentley by his side.